This is the Tom Bigby Tales, and I'm your host, Shannon Evans. This episode is titled Nancy Carpenter Hits the Panic Button. The Columbus Visitors Bureau, also known as the CVB, had its monthly board meeting, and boy, was it filled with interesting shenanigans from Camp Carpenter. These actions by one of her sycophants made it clear just how desperate Nancy Luke Carpenter is to not give up her cushy job and fat salary at the end of March when her contract expires and she's forced to retire. Let's get into it. After a bunch of magazine ad bills were brought to the board's attention, ads that were purchased without board approval, board member Risa Lawrence rushed to change the subject and distract from Carpenter's repeated use of funds greater than $5,000 without board approval and her attempts to spend the CVB's budget into oblivion. Lawrence wanted to discuss the contracts that have already been signed by the two current employees who are taking over Carpenter's role in the positions as executive director and COO of the CVB. Lawrence wanted to know why the board did not vote to accept the signed copies of the two women replacing Carpenter. Keep in mind that a hiring committee was created by this currently sitting board. The committee then came back to the board in an executive session with the recommendation to hire the two existing employees with 6 months contracts to be created by the board's attorney. The board at that moment voted unanimously, including Lawrence, to offer the two contracts. The two accepted and signed their contracts over 2 months ago, and their hire was announced and published in the local newspaper. It is only now that Lawrence, undoubtedly coached by Carpenter, is raising any questions. The board's attorney reminded Lawrence the contracts were a done deal and legally binding documents. And still, Lawrence pressed on, insulting the selection committee and the board's attorney's work product. Things got tense, but it became clear it was a closed matter. Apparently, Carpenter is becoming desperate to not lose her cushy position and significant salary. It is to Lawrence's credit that after the meeting, she did apologize to the committee members who had created the work documents and to the board's attorney. However, back to Carpenter. Becoming a pensioner and living on a reduced income must be a scary event that's a nearing reality for her. She is currently employed by the Columbus Cultural Heritage Foundation, and that's where she will be moving into permanently and into the Tennessee Williams Building full time, where the Columbus Cultural Heritage Foundation's offices are, on 1 April. Keep in mind, Carpenter has no salary in the budget there. The foundation has a very lean budget provided by the CVB. Their board only requested from the CVB board for the 2023-2024 fiscal year, $100,000. All but $40,000 goes to overhead for the building. That $40,000 then goes to pay the docents who work there. It is not clear how they plan to fund paying Carpenter or their board's attorney, Stephanie Woodard, who was recently hired. Someone better keep a close eye on the Butler Statue Fund and make sure Carpenter is not tempted to rob Peter to pay her own Paul expenses. Carpenter has been dragging her feet about moving to her new role across the parking lot at the foundation, where she has no cushy executive office, no extra perks like car expense budget, no health insurance, and certainly no life insurance. She's leaving for an austere seat in the Tennessee Williams dining room table. But Lord knows she has tried to keep her custom-built office back over at the CVB, where she currently is housed, through various bullying and manipulation tactics. But the CVB board has let her know she doesn't have to go home, but she can't stay in the CVB office. And she's stewing and spluttering mad over it. Add to that, she has told members of the community that her replacements are not qualified or properly trained to take over. Well, Nancy Carpenter, you have no one to blame for that but yourself. You could have trained them over the past few months, but instead you've been mostly absent or, when present, an insufferable person to be around. Carpenter has even tried to take credit for the ultimate frisbee tournament that she ignored every email from the county rep, Tom Bellick, for 5 months. She personally took credit for all the teams arriving and staying in our hotels at the most recent board meeting. Good grief. Just the hubris of that is enough to tell you why it is good riddance of Carpenter at the end of March. Perhaps the crowning event of the evening was when Carpenter wanted to refuse access by the historic home tours to the CVB for selling their tickets with their own paid or volunteer ticket salespeople during spring pilgrimage. The spring pilgrimage is Columbus's brand image to outside tourism for over 80 years. But under Carpenter, this event was so underpromoted, it almost died completely until the homeowners took the event away from CVB management and instead took over running it, but formed a limited community partnership with the CVB for promotion purposes. There are several earlier podcasts outlining the history of how Carpenter waited always to the last minute to promote the event, etc. There's also another episode on Carpenter not allowing the homeowners association to know how many tickets were sold or how many monies were collected in previous years at this same event. And that was primarily why the homeowners took the event back. Now that Carpenter is reading the writing on the wall that she's out the door, she's trying to sabotage this year's pilgrimage as well as the Preservation Society's architectural home tours. Thankfully, cooler heads have prevailed, and the board understands the importance of rebuilding our town's historic home tours, and both the Preservation Society and the Historic Home Tours Association relationship with the Columbus Visitors Bureau. The Historic Home Tours Group and the Preservation Society, along with sporting events like that Frisbee tournament and the 9 upcoming baseball and soccer and other tournaments in town, can have a positive financial impact on our community. But no thanks to our thankfully outgoing Columbus Visitors Bureau Director, Nancy Luke Carpenter. Good riddance. Now, maybe this town's tourism can flourish once again without her at the helm and with more calculated and concerned citizens running the event, like the 2 new hires. Thank you for coming and listening to the Tom Bigby Tales. Until next time.